Hello everyone, welcome back to the course on Health Humanities, Indian and Western Medical Knowledge Traditions. This is lecture number 49, and in this lecture I will talk about human-nature relationships and planetary health in Amitabh Ghosh's The Sea of Poppies. In this lecture I will talk about how the relation between human beings and nature affect not just the biodiversity but also affect the health of the land, and it affects the health of the people over there. In this lecture I will talk about what is planetary health, and then I'll bring a brief overview of human nature relationship in Sea of Poppies. I'll also discuss briefly about the colonial impact, colonization in India, and how it has affected nature and indigenous lives, and how it has led to the environmental destruction due to the cultivation of opium. We also find that there are some characters in this novel who discuss and who represent environmental consciousness and indigenous voice. Further, I will talk about pollution and ecological degradation and resistance as a path to environmental and social justice. So this is about how Indian perspectives are how Amitabh Ghosh looks at the environmental health, how Amitabh Ghosh looks at the planetary health, and this he represents with the help of narratives that is centered in the colonial Indian period, and how the cultivation of opium has led to the destruction of nature and also oppression of human beings, particularly women. And let us briefly talk about what is planetary health or eco health. And in planetary health or eco health, the focus is on it studies how the nature is exploited beyond the point. It talks about the excessive exploitation of nature, and then it also asserts how nature can be preserved, not for the sake of nature only, but also for the sake of human beings. We find that in most of the cases, people consider people take anthropocentric view and think that everything in nature is for their sake, for their benefit, and and then they take the approach of exploiting the nature. They follow anthropocentric, patriarchal, capitalist attitude towards all the non-human beings. It can be animals, it can be nature, it can be any other non-human beings, and woman, nature and landscape. So the concern of planetary health, or we can also call it eco-criticism in certain sense, are about to expose the anthropocentrism, patriarchal notions and capitalist attitudes towards towards non-human beings and women, nature and landscape. Pramod K. Nair says that it actually focuses on ecological concerns in literary and cultural texts. And when we look at Cheryl Glott-Felty, in his book, The Eco-Criticism Reader, Cheryl Glott-Felty says, eco-criticism is the study of relationship between literature and environment. How environment has been represented in literature, how narrative represents environment, environmental concerns, environmental exploitation. So that study is called like eco-criticism, and this lecture is combination or combined study of eco-criticism as well as planetary health. When we go deeper in the novel, Sea of Poppies by Amitav Ghosh, we find that this novel reflects human beings' abuse to its non-human counterparts, that is nature. The novel talks about how human and nature relationship need a dialogue, and how this dialogue has been disrupted due to colonization. Further, it also talks about that how not only nature but also women who feel trapped under patriarchy and face not just torture and exploitation, but they also try to actually make their efforts to find out the forces which are treating them inhumanly. They want to reveal the ruthless forces, the ruthless British forces, and the kind of injustice they impose upon them. And in this way, this novel deals with the search for a possible positive alternative to the colonizers' exploitative act, or to find out an alternative how colonizers were exploiting nature, how they were exploiting the indigenous population, and also offer a resistance to those exploitative acts, those means of exploitation. In this way, the novel portrays how nature is not just getting exploited, but along with nature, how women are also exploited. And hence this novel offers the question, how does colonization affect nature and indigenous people in Amitav Ghosh's Sea of Poppies? How does Ghosh portray resistance as a means to discover environmental and social justice? So I have these two key questions. One, that how does colonization affect nature and indigenous people, number one. And number two, how does Ghosh portray resistance as a means to discover environmental and social justice? When we look at the relationship between human beings and nature in the novel, we find that the novel provides a conversation between how human and nature relate to each other. And after setting up or after the cultivation of opium, after the cultivation of poppy in colonial India, how the health of soil, how the health of earth and nature gets disturbed, and it needs its protection. And when we look at the novel is about a story of a lady whose name is Diti. And once like Diti is married, and she goes to the house of her husband, who is important. But to her surprise, she is raped by her husband's brother-in-law, and she also then has a daughter, and whose father is not her husband but her husband's brother-in-law. And her exploitation continues, and once her husband dies, she has one option, that she can self-emulate herself, and what you call that she will be sati, and she will burn herself on her husband's funeral pyre. But with the help of Kaluga, she escapes, and her escape is not just her escape, but also the escape from all kind of exploitation which she might be suffering, and also the escape from the exploitation of nature which she has incorporated in herself. In the novel, nature plays an important role for the characters. And when we look at the story of Diti, and we find that how human beings are dependent upon nature, how Diti is dependent upon nature. She is a native woman and who belongs to the native of, who lives in the Ghazipur, and she survives by cropping and cultivating poppy, and she possesses an environmental consciousness for being directly involved with nature. So her association with nature brings environmental consciousness in her, and this also reveals how she is deeply associated with nature. Her relationship with nature allows her to notice the difference that happens when East India Company takes over India for opium cultivation. And what happens when East India Company takes over for opium cultivation? And then we find that the cultivation of opium has significantly affected the life of indigenous people. It has significantly affected the health of indigenous people. And in this way, it was not affecting just the health of nature, but also the health of indigenous people. And we find that the significance of nature in human life can be seen from how nature provides everything that is needed to survive. So nature is seen as a nourisher. Nature is seen as a protector. Nature is something seen as a mother who can nourish everyone, who can provide everything to fulfill one's need. It is rightly said that nature has everything to fulfill one's need, but not one's greed. And in the case of Diti, in her everyday life, she and her family, they go to Ganga river to take bath. And when they have no money, then also they survive on the banks of Ganga river. And this shows how Diti's everyday need of water is fulfilled by Ganga. To quote from the novel, now her mind turned to her shrine room again. With the hour of the noontime puja drawing close, it was time to go to the river for a bath. After massaging poppy seed oil into Kabutari's hair and her own, Diti draped her spare sari over her shoulder and led her daughter towards the water across the field. She talks about how the water of Ganges fulfills her everyday needs. She also talks about like how she offers prayer, and then she uses a poppy seed oil for her daughter Kabutari, who is born to her once like she was raped by her husband's brother-in-law. And then she also applies the poppy seed oil on herself. Diti is a poppy farmer, and She makes her living, she makes her survival based on nature, and nature works for her as a day-to-day working place for her. Nature provides her food, nature provides her nourishment, and she is able to, but now she is only able to plant poppies. Diti thinks that she still makes the most out of it by making use of poppy to fulfill her own daily needs. So the story reveals, the narrative reveals that earlier how she was able to fulfill all her needs with the help of nature. But since there is a imposition that one can cultivate only poppies, and then she is now able to still manage her needs with her poppies. And from the previous quote, we can find that how she and her daughter use poppy seeds oil to massage their hairs. So this not only this is not only the example how poppies are being used regularly in the life of Diti. In fact, Diti also uses poppy seeds in her cooking. She uses these seeds in cooking aloo post, which is a dish made of potatoes cooked in poppy seed paste. And so she is trying to manage that earlier she was dependent upon nature, but with the imposition of cultivating only poppy, she is trying to manage her day-to-day existence on poppies. But when her life becomes difficult, when her husband dies, then, as I said earlier, she was supposed to self-immolate. She was supposed to burn herself on her husband's funeral pyre. But a person named Kaluga comes and tries to save her, and then she escapes with him. And then she finds that at this point also nature provides her support. She gets healed by nature. Both Kaluga and Diti manage to survive by the help of nature. And we find that they live close to the Ganga, where Diti and Kaluga are saved from being hungry or thirsty despite having no money at all. The novel states, every evening Kaluga would light a fire and Diti would knead and cook a sufficient number of rotis to see them through the day. With Ganga close at hand, they had so far lagged for neither food nor water. So they found that since Ganga was close by, they had no lack of food, no lack of water. So nature, in this case river, the Ganges river, not only provided them shelter, but also food to eat, to survive, and also water to drink. Since Diti and her family rely so much on nature, it is not surprising to see how changes that affect the nature will also affect their lives. Since their life is based upon nature, and with the imposition of cultivating opium, their life is going to be affected. And this represents how human beings and nature have symbiotic relationship with each other. I said earlier that Diti is involved directly with nature, and hence she also possesses environmental consciousness. Diti is included in those who are aware and notices about the changes that happen to nature. So she is aware about every bit of changes that is happening in the nature, that is happening in the environment, and how it is affecting the health of environment. The novel presents us an image of how British colonization in India affected the nature, and native like Diti are of those who are forced to accept the changes in the environment that also influences numerous changes in her daily life. So the impact of colonization, the intervention of colonization not only affected nature, not only destroyed nature, but it also affected the indigenous population like Diti. And her life is deeply affected and impacted by the changes that have occurred in nature. And the changes in nature also affected her day-to-day routine. The novel presents the facts that in the late 18th century India, British has established a monopoly over opium production in India. By then, British has forced a new cultivation system to Indians' nature and natives. So by 18th century, the British government in India, the East India Company in India, imposed that everyone should cultivate opium, and this cultivation of opium affected the nature and the native populations. The cultivation of opiums provided huge profit to the British forces, and it has high demand. The British government has high demand for the opium, but colonialism has changed the way poppies are produced in India. So earlier, poppies were produced along with other crops in a particular season, but now poppies are what we call opiums are produced in every season and everywhere in the field. No other crop was allowed to be cultivated. Let us look this narrative, this extract from the novel Sea of Poppies. When Diti was her daughter's age, things were different. Poppies had been a luxury then, grown in small clusters between the fields that bore the main winter crops: wheat, masoor dal, and vegetables. Her mother would send some of her poppy seeds to the oil press, and the rest she would keep for the house, some for replanting, and some to cook with meat and vegetables. As for the sap, it was sieved of impurities and left to dry until the sun turned it into hard abkari of fame. At that time, no one thought of producing the wet, treacherously tanned opium that was made and packaged in English factory to be sent across the sea in boat. It reveals how the cultivation and production of opium changed within few years. Diti says that when she was of the age of her child, then production of opium was luxury because it was produced along with main winter crops along with wheat, masoor dal, and vegetables. And people used to have some oil of opium seeds, and some they used to really preserve for replantation, and some that can be used in cooking meats and vegetables. But now the production has been so enormous that now no one thinks that this is so important. But she finds that like how it has been now getting packaged in English factories and then sent across sea in the boats for the British population. So we find that the start of production of poppies, opiums in large scale, and it was meant to be sent or to be exported outside India. And when Britishers arrived, they imposed new cultivation system. Their purpose was that whatever is produced in India, everything is exported abroad, and there is nothing which are left for the Indians, which they can eat, which upon which they can survive. So, Diti also says that poppies are no longer a luxury because it is being planted all year in a massive amount as well. So like a crop which was seasonal, which was cultivated in the month of winter along with other crops, now it is cultivated round the year and in massive amount. No other crops are allowed. And these poppies are planted in large amount to fulfill British demands of opium production. And poppies have taken over the land all across India. So throughout India, poppies were getting cultivated. But what happened when poppies are cultivated around every year, around every nook and corner of India and around the year? Then we find that the cultivation of poppies has changed the way the land is used. And the enormous scale of poppy cultivation is indeed a form of abuse to the health of land itself. So the production of poppies has affected the health of land, the health of soil, the health of earth, and the landscape is filled with remnants of poppy harvest. So since like poppies are cultivated around the year, so like what are the remains of the poppy harvest, then those things are left on the ground in the fields, and it is affecting the soil, it is affecting the condition of the land. And Diti gets disturbed. She feels upset over the fact that the environment has lost its green color, and it is becoming, the land is becoming barren, the land is losing its health. And Diti is able to see that greenery in her environment brings a sense of relief, but now that greenery is getting lost. Unfortunately, seasonal crops are no longer planted. In order to gain as much poppy harvest as possible, so all the seasonal crops, whether moong dal or wheat or rice or any other seasonal crops, their productions has been stopped because the government imposed the law that the task of every farmer is to produce poppy as much as they can. And in this case, winter crops like vegetables and grains are nowhere to be found. So the production of vegetables and other grains were stopped. The cultivation of poppies in massive amount has created an obvious problem, which is the loss of nature's biodiversity. So we find that the cultivation of opium, the cultivation of poppies, not only affected the health of the land, but also affected the biodiversity of the nature. Since the poppies monoculture is forced, it has resulted in various problems on the environment. Previously, it can be seen the nature has lost its biodiversity, with the land being taken over entirely by the poppies. Another apparent result of this practice is effect to the soil. On the long run, this monoculture may result in damage of the soil. So we find that with the large number of the productions of opiums, nature has lost its biodiversity, number one. Number two, that it has affected the condition of soil. It has damaged the health of soil, the health of land. And this damage may be seen in how the valuable soil nutrients deplete over time, since poppies monoculture require the cultivation of poppies over a large area for years. So we find that the repeated cultivation of poppies in a year is leading depletion of soil nutrients and affecting the health of land. And it is also affecting the biodiversity, because biodiversity is needed by the soil to maintain the nutrients to keep it fertile. Without biodiversity, the earth, the land, the soil cannot remain fertile. It will be a wasteland, a barren land. And we find that since the farmers in the novel do not plant the seasonal crops anymore, there is no crop rotation efforts to restore the nutrients that are required for the soil. So it is necessary to have rotation of crops which can maintain the health of soil, but it is not rotated anymore. And its most obvious effect can be seen in how Diti, along with some other farmers, are experiencing late harvest, which is possibly caused by the lack of available soil nutrients. That the crops are not getting ripe on time, and they need more time to grow, and this is revealing the depletion of soil nutrients. Further, we find that the poppies monoculture also affect the animal population in various ways. The enormous amount of poppies in the field is shown to have pacified animals, as shown in this paragraph. Let us quote an extract from the novel Sea of Poppies. The novel states, as her steps lengthened, she saw that on some nearby fields the crop was well in advance of her own. Some of her neighbors had already nicked their pods, and white ooze of sap could be seen congealing around the parallel incisions of the nucha. The sweet, heady odor of The bleeding pots had drawn swarms of insects, and the air was buzzing with bees, grasshoppers, and wasps. Many would get many would get stuck in the ooze, and tomorrow, when the sap turned color, their bodies would merge into the black gum, becoming a welcome addition to the weight of the harvest. The sap seemed to have a pacifying effect even on the butterflies, which flapped their wings in oddly erratic pattern, as though they could not remember how to fly. So it reveals that how cultivation of poppies not only affected the health of human beings, but it also affected the health of so many other animals, so many other insects. They were getting intoxicated, and particularly like insects, flies, they were getting stuck in the gum of the poppies, and then dying there. Their body was becoming black. It reveals that how poppies, how opium became the source, the symbol, the medium of death for insects, flies, and many other animals. It also reveals that how the biodiversity of nature is getting affected. Apparently, this is about the cultivation of opium, and we find in historical records that opium production has led to the enormous health crisis for the human beings. But the crisis was not only for human beings, it was for the nature, it was for the animals, for birds, for insects, for many, many other beings of the earth. We find that grasshoppers, wasps, flies, they were getting stuck up in the gum oozing out from the opium plants, and then they were dying, their body was becoming black, and then they were increasing the weight of the opium, which is sold to the foreign countries. In this way, this paragraph reveals that how opium affects the health of all the beings of nature, the health of human beings, the health of soil, the health of land, and all other insects in the land, all other insects in the air. And we find that on her way to the factory in Kalua's oxen cart, Diti and Kabutari suffer because of the opium-filled air. The waste of the factory in the form of fog takes over the fresh air of the city. The polluted air gives a terrible effect not only to humans but also to the animals. Diti, Kabutari, Kaluga, including Kaluga's oxen, and everyone nearby the factory cannot help but sneeze because of the air pollution. So how the production of opium has affected the condition of air, and which is affecting the health of human beings, represented over here through Kaluga, Diti, and Kabutari. It is affecting the health of animals, the oxes, the bullocks of Kaluga. It is affecting the health of everyone around. It is polluting the air. Let's have a look at the novel. As Kaluga's cart rolled on towards the factory's main compound, Diti and Kabutari began to sneeze. Soon, Kaluga and oxen were sniffling too, for they had now drawn abreast of the godowns where farmers came to dispose of their poppy trash, leaves, stalks, and roots, all of which were used in the packaging of drug. Ground up for storage, these remains produced a fine dust that hung in the air like a fog of snuff. Rare was the passers-by who could brave this mist without exploding into paroxysms of sneezes and sniffles, and yet it was a miracle, plain to behold, that the coolies pounding the trash were no more affected by the dust than were their young English overseers. So this paragraph reveals how the production of poppies has affected the condition of the nature of air, and the entire environment is polluted, and everyone is getting affected except the people, the local coolies, the indigenous people who are working there. The narrative reveals that how production of poppies and its processing in the factory has caused a health hazard for everyone, for all beings, whether human, animal, birds, insects, wasp, everyone is getting affected. And in this way we find that the waste of the opium factory does not only pollute the air, but it also contaminates the Ganga river, and it affects the animals in the environment. So the production of opium pollutes the air, contaminates the water, and affects the health of animals. It damages environment, it damages the health of all the beings, whether natural or human beings. For instance, Diti finds how the factory's effluence is badly affecting the population of monkeys near the factory. So the other animals like monkeys, they are also getting affected by the effluences of opium. So the production of poppies, which was imposed by the British government in India, has affected not just nature, but all the elements, all the beings of nature, like bulls, monkeys, birds, and everything. Their health is getting damaged and they are suffering from the overproduction of opiums. After consuming the contaminated water from the Ganga river, the monkeys seem to mimic an opium addict. Those monkeys lose their excitement and are stupefied by the factory's waste. We find that the monkeys are also having intoxicated effect of opium. And once like they drink, look at the condition that the water of Ganga is so much intoxicated because of the overproduction of opiums that monkeys are also mimicking the opium addict human beings, and it is affecting their health. This is an extract from the novel. The monkeys that lived around it, for instance, Diti pointed a few of these out to Kabutari. So the monkeys who were around, Diti points them to her daughter Kabutari as the ox cart trundled towards the walls. Unlike others of their kind, they never came down from the trees. It was to lap at the open sewers and that drained the factories' effluents. After having sated their cravings, they would climb back into the branches to resume their stupefied scrutiny of Ganga and its currents. So this paragraph reveals how the animals, the other beings are impacted by the intoxication of opium. It also reveals that how much the water of Ganga is intoxicated. To add further, we find the broken earthenware parts that are scattered around the rivers also cause the pollution to the Ganga water. The parts which are used to contain raw opium seem to contaminate the population of fish. The population of aquatic animal is under the influence of the raw opium remnants. And we can find this in the following extract. The stretch of river bank was unlike any other. For the ghats around the Karkhana were sewed up with thousands of broken earthenwares. Gharas, the round bottom vessel in which raw opium was brought to the factory. The belief was widespread that fish were more easily caught after they had nibbled at the shards, and as a result, the bank was always crowded with fishermen. So we find that the beings of water are also affected by the production of opium. So the cultivation of opium, the cultivation of poppies affected the health of soil, the health of animals, birds, insects, flies. Then we find that it is affecting the condition of water, the condition of air, and once the condition of water is disturbed, then all the creatures of the water, particularly fish, are getting affected. And we also find that the earthen parts which are used to collect the opiums, once they get broken, they are thrown in the Ganga's water, and then they pollute Ganga's water. And once Ganga's water is polluted, the fishes arrive on the banks, and then we find that there are a number of fishermen who go and catch the fishes. And once these fishes are sold in the market, it will affect the health of human beings. So the cultivation of opium, the cultivation of poppies have led to the cycle of health disturbances, that one after another the health of every being will be disturbed. The effects of colonization of indigenous people.